Welcome to the channel. Be sure and like, subscribe, click on the bell icon, and comment down below. Today I thought I would compare the Harley Street Glide to the Indian Chieftain. I mean, Harley Davidson is king when it comes to baggers, when it comes to American-made touring bikes. They sell a tremendous number of motorcycles, but I think the only real competition would be the Indian line of baggers and touring bikes. And they're both American made. They're both very iconic brands. They both have a storied past. Of course, Indian's past is more storied than Harley Davidson, but Harley Davidson does have the AMF years that were not the best time for Harley Davidson. But these two bikes are very similar. Now, I'm no expert, but I have had a lot of experience on both motorcycles. And by the way, I love both brands. I love Harley Davidsons. I've owned 6 Harley Davidsons. I have owned 3 Indians, and I've been riding motorcycles for 50 years. So back in 2019, I bought a Harley Street Glide. I had it about 8 months, put about 8,000 miles on it. So I feel like I've got a good feel for the Harley Street Glide. The latter part of 2019, I bought the Indian. I've had it 3 years. I have 48,000 miles on it. So I've had a lot of time in the saddle with both motorcycles. So I want to tell you what I like about each one and what I don't like. And I'll give you my own personal preference between the two. And for the sake of price point, I thought I would compare the base model on each one. I mean, you can get the Street Glide Special, you can get the Chieftain Limited with more bells and whistles, but again, for price point sake, and for all of us who are on a budget, and sometimes price point matters, I'm going to be focusing on the base model. So when you look at the two websites, at first it appears that the Harley is less expensive. When you look at the base model Street Glide, it lists for $21,430. So $21,400. The Chieftain, on the other hand, lists for $22,499. So right off the bat, it looks like, well, the Indian's a couple $1,000s more expensive. But on the Indian, ABS brakes come standard. On the Harley, they charge $819 for ABS, at least at this time. Sometimes I see an ABS charge on a Harley website, sometimes it's gone, but currently $819 for ABS for the Harley Davidson. So that puts the price much closer together. Since the pandemic, both manufacturers have added a surcharge. Harley Davidson lists their surcharge at $1,000. Indian lists their surcharge at $800. So then by the time you add ABS and the difference in the surcharge price, you're looking at, for the Harley, $23,249. 23,200. The Indian is $23,299. So now they're within $50 of each other. But there is one option. I said I want to look at the base model for price point, but there's one option I would really want on either one or both of the bikes. If I was going to buy either one of these bikes, this would be the one option that I would definitely want, and that's navigation. I enjoyed having navigation on my Harley. I enjoy having navigation on my Indian, especially if you're just out exploring back roads. I've been up in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas, and I knew I could just ride to my little heart was content, and then I could pull up the navigation and it would take me back to the motel. So navigation, I would definitely want to have. And it looks like to add the navigation on the Harley or get the radio, you just get a whole another radio with the screen on it. As opposed to the little standard radio, you're looking at a $700 or so difference. And the Indian, they just somehow download the software onto the existing radio. It comes with the big screen and all the features, and it's $550 to add it on to the Indian. So now you're looking at, for the Harley, $23,949. The Indian, $23,849. So now you're looking at $100 difference between the two. And by the time you add those features, the Indian ends up being $100 less, when initially it looked like it was $1,000 more. So price point, they're very competitive. So if you're if price point matters and you want to get the base model, either one of them, you're looking at almost $24,000 before tax, title, license, and sometimes they add prep fees and freight and all those other things. So still, I think price point, they're competitive. So let me tell you what I like about each one and what I don't like. And I'm going to start with the Harley Davidson because it is the king. Let's see. For one thing, the Harley Davidson, the exhaust sound, the stock exhaust sound sounds better than the Indian. I think the Indian sounds really good. It's got that V-twin rumble, but it just has a different feel, the motor. And I think with the stock pipes, now either one you can add exhaust that make it sound fantastic, but stock pipes, I think the Harley is king. I like the dash better on the Harley because both of them have the batwing style fairing, but the dash on the Harley's nice and smooth. It's nice and flat. The Indian, the screen actually sticks out considerably. And of course the screen's larger on the Indian, which accounts for some of that, plus the electric, making room for the electric windshield, which I'll make reference to that in a little bit. But the dash is nice and smooth. Matter of fact, the screen and everything, the dash sticks out so far on the Indian, and you have a side gas cap on the Indian as opposed to center. You have to turn the handlebars to the left to be able to put gas in it. So I like the dash better on the Harley Davidson. Of course, Harley Davidson has a much stronger dealer network. Of course, sometimes I think it's oversaturation, and Harley seems to be closing some of the smaller mom and pop dealerships. So I think the number of Harley dealerships is going to continue to decrease, but still, there's tons of Harley dealerships everywhere, which is beneficial if you break down on the road, you're traveling, you're 2 or 3 states away. And Harley Davidson has a reputation that if you break down, you're on the road, you take it to the service department, they'll put you in the front of the line. If they have that part, they'll get that part on there as quick as possible and get you back on the road. If they don't have the part, they order it and they get it as quick as they can. And warranty. I've had a much better experience with Harley Davidson warranty work. If they just remotely think it's warranty related, they cover it under the warranty. Sometimes with Indian, the dealership will submit the warranty claim, corporate will deny the warranty claim, and then I, as a customer, will call corporate customer service and explain to them why I think that should be covered under warranty. Then they will assign a claim number, and often they will go ahead and approve the warranty work. You shouldn't have to do that extra step. So Harley Davidson, better dealer network, I think better warranty coverage or fulfilling the warranty. And I just think customer service after the sale is fantastic with Harley Davidson. Well, the customer service in general. You walk into a Harley Davidson dealership, you're greeted by everyone. If you buy a Harley Davidson, they're going to give you a tour of the whole facility. I've been to Indian dealerships before where I've gone in, looked at a motorcycle, sat on a motorcycle, pulled out my phone, took several pictures of the motorcycle, and left without a living, breathing soul saying a word to me. And this is in a major city when this happened. Now, I look around, they only have, looks like a couple of salespersons, and they're both waiting on customers. I get that, but still, customer service is fantastic with Harley Davidson. And of course, aftermarket. Anything and everything you can imagine to do to your Harley Davidson. You can buy the manufactured product, or for a fraction of the cost, you can buy an aftermarket product. And it's getting that way with Indian. The aftermarket scene is improving vastly since I have owned an Indian motorcycle. I mean, you can now buy aftermarket parts for sometimes a third or maybe a quarter of the price of the actual manufactured accessory. So those are things I like about the Harley and the Street Glide. Things I don't like. The seating position. When I ride a Harley Davidson, I feel like the seat has me up on the tank. More of a sit up and beg, but the floorboards are farther back. The floorboards are much smaller. I'm sitting more up on the tank, more of a sit up and beg position. The seat. That was one of the first things I changed on my Street Glide was the seat. The driver's seat was not that comfortable, and the passenger portion of the seat was almost non-existent. And you look on the Indian, if it's the Chieftain, I mean, the passenger seat's much smaller than some of the other Indian touring bikes, or Harley touring bikes for that matter. But it appears to be a much larger, much better passenger seat than the Harley Davidson passenger seat. And the thing I despised about my Street Glide, was the rear shock. They put a short shock on it. They want to give it that slam look. You've only got a couple of inches of travel versus about 4 inches or more of travel on the Indian. That shock beat me to death. Now, it's got a nice little dial where you're supposed to be able to dial it in for your weight and if you've got it loaded down with luggage, but I couldn't find the sweet spot. If there was one, I couldn't find it. That suspension beat me to death. And if you're just running around in town, you could live with the suspension. If you're going to start doing 6, 7, 800 miles a day, do some all-day rides that I often do, that suspension will wear you out. It will beat you. I've been down the interstate before where it was just beating me up, so I hated the rear suspension. If I had have kept my Street Glide, I'd have had to have upgraded the rear shocks. I would have had no choice. It was terrible. I had no excuse to pay well over 20 grand for a motorcycle and have terrible rear suspension. And the Harley does not come with LED lighting. Again, you spend that kind of money on a motorcycle, you would expect, I think, in this day and time, LED lighting. So those are the things I like and I don't like about the Street Glide. Now the Harley, the Indian, I like the looks better. I like the war bonnet on the fender, the Indian script, the side profile of a chief with the war bonnet. All of that just screams American heritage. I just like the look of the Indian over the Street Glide. Comfort. For me, it's far more comfortable. I've done some 800-mile days, or done an 800-mile day on my Indian. I was going to go back and look and see how many hours I spent in the saddle that day, because a lot of that time was going through small towns up in the Ozark Mountains when we were driving very slow. I'm trying to remember. We left, on that particular day, our kickstand up, I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning, got home about 10 o'clock that night, and we stopped for lunch and stopped at Scenic Overview. So I spent all day in the saddle, and my seat performed very well. I sit a little farther back. I'm not up on the tank. I am 6'1", so the extra room is nice. The floorboards are huge. I have a full range of motion to move my feet. I can put my foot on my ball of my foot on the back of the floorboard. I can put my 11 size boot on the center of the floorboard. I can put my heels on the front of the floorboard. That's all without highway pegs. A huge range of motion for my legs. I can move them all around. I actually prefer the motor better, the 111 versus the 107. My Street Glide had the 107. All three Indians I've owned all had the 111. Of course, Indian makes a larger motor. Harley makes a larger motor, but again, I was looking at price point in this comparison. The motor just seems to pull harder all the way up. I can be at freeway speed, need to pass an 18-wheeler and hit it without gearing down, and that Thunderstroke 111 motor is really a solid motor. And I also love the Milwaukee 8. To me, it's much better than the old twin cams. And if I was going to buy another Harley Davidson, I would want one. If I was going to buy a used one, I'd want one with the Milwaukee 8 motor. And both of them are very, very good motors. They're very close. But if you just seat of the pants, now I don't know about actual torque, horsepower, drag strip, quarter time, but I'm talking seat of the pants, the Indian feels like it pulls harder to me. The windshield. I love the electric windshield. One of my favorite YouTubers had commented, well, maybe it's a gimmick. I'm telling you, it's not a gimmick. I raise and lower it every single time I ride. I'm on the freeway, I set it at a certain height. If I'm running around town, I set it at a different height. If it's raining, I set it at a different height. I love the electric windshield. I believe that Harley Davidson is the only manufacturer left who produces a full-on touring bike that does not have an electric adjustable windshield. The Ride Command, or Harley calls it the infotainment system. I think Indian has a better Ride Command. It's a larger screen. You can do a split screen feature where you might want to put your navigation on one side of the screen and other information, and you can set it up on, or you can just use the navigation for the whole screen. But the screen's larger. It has more features, and the split screen, things like that. The radio, to me, the radio sounds louder on the Indian. Now, the Harley I thought had a fantastic radio too, but the Indian radio to me sounds louder. I think the volume goes up to 10. I can leave it on about 4 at 75 miles an hour and hear it crystal clear. I like the radio better. I mentioned the LED lights. The Indian comes with the LED lights. So the one thing I don't like, and the only thing I don't like about the Indian is the heat management. I think Harley does a better job with heat management. I just get more heat off that rear cylinder on the exhaust side, down where the catalytic converter is, than I did on my Harley Davidsons. Now, you can decat it, freer flowing exhaust and breather and so on, and have it tuned and improve on that heat. And of course, the newer ones, mine doesn't have rear cylinder deactivation. The newer ones, they have rear cylinder deactivation, things like that help. But I just think Harley does a much better job on heat management. There's one thing I forgot to mention, so with a little editing magic, I'll drop this in the video. I forgot to mention highway bars, engine guards, crash bars, whichever you want to call them. The base model Indian Chieftain does not come with engine guards. What was Indian thinking? The base model Street Glide does. I mean, actually, that would be the very first thing I would add if I bought the base model Chieftain, because you can get distracted. You can forget to put the kickstand down. You can be in a super slow turn in a parking lot and a car start to back out. You slam on the brakes, the handlebars are turned, you're already leaning. There's a point beyond no return. The bikes are so heavy, if it leans over far enough, it's going to ease over onto the crash bars. Sometimes it eases over so softly it may not even scratch the bottom of the crash bars. But a big heavy touring bike, you need the crash bars. So that's another thing I don't like about the fact that Indian left the crash bars off. So I would have to add crash bars if I bought the Indian Chieftain. And for that kind of money, that's just unexcusable. They should come on at standard. Now for me, the Harley, the biggest complaint for me is the rear shock that can be changed. To me, the biggest complaint with the Indian is the heat management. And of course, I say I have an Indian. I didn't buy the Chieftain, I bought the Roadmaster, which is essentially the same bike but with trunk and lower fairings. The Chieftain doesn't come with the lower fairings, and the heat's much better because this summer I took my lower fairings off, and that extra airflow improved it. But still, to me, the Indian still puts out more heat. But the heat can be resolved by decatting the exhaust. So for me, the rear shocks is not a deal breaker for the Harley Davidson because you can resolve that issue, and the heat management is not a deal breaker for the Indian because you can resolve that issue as well. So I like both motorcycles. I don't think you go wrong with buying either one. If you're a diehard Harley person, that's all you're going to buy anyway. But I mean, if you love Harleys, buy a Harley. If you like the Indians, buy an Indian. Dependability, one of my Harleys that I did put 40-something thousand miles on had a very costly repair at 40-something thousand miles, but that was the old twin cam motor. It wasn't the new Milwaukee 8. I've got a buddy of mine that has tons of miles on his Milwaukee 8, and it still runs like new. I've got 48,000 miles on my Indian. It has been extremely dependable. It has started every single time. It's 3 years old with the original battery, and it still fires up. And I've never even put the battery on a tender, but I do ride it every day. So both are great motorcycles. If I was you, consider either one. Go test drive both of them. For me, the ride comfort for me on the Indian. If I'm going to ride 12, 14 hours in one day, I want to be able to do it and be relatively comfortable. And you can do that on the Indian. On the Harley, you'd have to make some improvements. You can, again, upgrade the shocks into the seat and do that. But right out of the crate, for me, the comfort and the looks were the two tipping points. And the performance certainly was a factor as well. But I between the two, I just prefer the Indian at this point. Now, Harley may make some improvements. And again, if you're a Harley guy, buy a Harley. If you'd consider another brand, look at the Indian. Go take it for a test drive. I know a lot of people like me that were long-term Harley people. Once they test drove the Indian, it was an easy decision to make the switch. So both brands are great. You won't go wrong with either one. But that's what I personally like about the Street Glide, the Chieftain, and what I don't like about each one. Be sure again and subscribe and like and comment and click on the bell icon. All of those things help the channel, and I enjoy doing the channel. I'm going to continue to grow the channel. So thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, if you like to ride as much as you can, because one day we're all going to be too old to ride.
Like and subscribe and leave a comment down below.